I remember the day like it was yesterday. I was only 11, clutching my small backpack, standing at the doorway of my own home while my mom, Elaine, told me I had to leave. Her voice was cold, almost sharp, like she was telling me this was just another chore she needed to get rid of. My stepdad, Richard, didn't even look up from his newspaper. He said nothing, like my leaving was expected, normal, nothing to react to. I looked back, hoping for some kind of warmth, some sign that I mattered, but all I saw was Marley, my little sister, her eyes wide and silent. She didn't cry, didn't protest, but I could see her heart breaking just by the way she bit her lip. I didn't understand why this was happening. I hadn't done anything to deserve this. One moment I was part of our little world, the next I was being shoved into the care of people I barely knew. My aunt and uncle lived hours away, and when I arrived, it was clear they didn't want me there either. Their smiles were tight, their welcome half-hearted, and I felt every ounce of unwelcome pressing down on me. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake, listening to the sounds of a house that wasn't mine, wondering if I'd ever see my family or my room again. I carried that fear everywhere, like a shadow I couldn't shake. School became my escape, but even there, I felt invisible, like the world had forgotten I existed. Every letter I wrote to Marley went unanswered, and every holiday passed with me sitting alone, wondering why the people who were supposed to love me had let me go. At 11, I learned how quickly life could turn against you and how heavy it feels when the people who are supposed to protect you don't. Little did I know, 21 years later, the truth would come out, and everything I thought I understood about my mom would be shattered forever. Living with Aunt Sylvia and Uncle Greg was nothing like home. Their house was cold, not with winter chill, but with their words and looks. Meals were rushed, rooms were small, and every mistake felt like proof that I didn't belong. School wasn't any easier. Kids laughed at my worn-out clothes and the way I couldn't join in on the latest trends. Teachers barely noticed me, and friends were few. I learned quickly to keep my head down, to swallow my words, and to hide the hurt inside. Meanwhile, Elaine never reached out. Letters went unanswered, calls were ignored. Whenever I asked about her, Aunt Sylvia would shrug and say, "She thinks you're too difficult." I didn't understand. How could I be too difficult when all I wanted was love, protection, and a home? It felt like she had erased me from her life, as if 11 years of memories didn't matter. The only connection I had was Marley. Every now and then, I would find a folded note slipped under my pillow or taped to my closet door. They were short, just a few words, "I'm sorry," or "I miss you." But those small gestures were all I had, fragile reminders that not everyone in my family had turned against me. Over time, the hurt hardened into resentment. I stopped hoping Elaine would change or that anyone would notice my pain. Betrayal became a constant companion. I learned that family could fail you in ways no one outside could understand, and that sometimes the people who were supposed to love you most could hurt you the deepest. Each day was a lesson in survival, in trusting only myself, and in carrying a wound that would not heal for years to come. By the time I turned 16, I had stopped hoping for Elaine to show up in my life. But one afternoon, rummaging through some old papers at Aunt Sylvia's, I found something that made my stomach drop. There was a letter, folded and yellowed, addressed to Elaine, mentioning a trust fund in my name, money she had received on my behalf years ago. She never told me. Not a word. All those birthdays, all those holidays, all those small moments I thought were lost, suddenly felt heavier. I realized then that my absence had been intentional, not just neglect. From that day, I began keeping track. I wrote down every missed birthday, every empty promise, every small slight and moment of financial manipulation. I stuffed the papers into a notebook I carried everywhere, like armor against a world that had already shown me how cruel family could be. Around that same time, I met Jordan Peck, a lawyer handling a minor property dispute for Aunt Sylvia and Uncle Greg. He was thorough, precise, and somehow seemed to notice the tension in my life. I didn't know it then, but he would become important later, a key to understanding the secrets Elaine had buried for decades. To survive, I started working multiple jobs after school, on weekends, even late nights when most kids my age were relaxing. I delivered papers, stocked shelves, babysat, anything I could do to keep a roof over my head and food in my stomach. It was exhausting, but it taught me resilience. Slowly, quiet anger built inside me, a fire I didn't yet know how to use. That anger, combined with the determination to never be powerless again, became the first step toward reclaiming everything Elaine had tried to steal from me. When I turned 22, I finally left the small town that had held me captive for so many years. I moved to a new state with nothing but a few bags and a head full of determination. I threw myself into real estate, starting at the bottom, showing houses, learning everything about the business, and slowly building a name for myself. Months turned into years, and what started as a struggle became success. I bought my own apartment, drove my own car, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to answer to anyone. Financial independence gave me a confidence I had never known, a quiet pride that no one could take away. Even as I built my life, fragments of the past kept appearing. Letters started arriving from a law firm I didn't recognize at first. They were formal, cryptic, and mentioned family matters I barely understood. One sentence here, one vague paragraph there, always hinting at secrets tied to my mother and her wealth. I couldn't ignore them, but I also didn't fully grasp what they meant. Each letter left me uneasy, a gnawing feeling that the story I knew about my family was only part of the truth. During this time, Marley would occasionally reach out. Her messages were short, sometimes apologetic, sometimes hesitant, revealing a conflict in her own heart. She seemed torn between loyalty to our mother and the memory of what had happened to me. Her contact was sporadic, but it reminded me that not all ties to my past were broken. It also reminded me that whatever secrets were hidden, they affected more than just me. I kept the letters, saved them carefully, unsure what I would do with them, but aware that one day, they would matter and that the life I had built might be the key to finally understanding everything Elaine had tried to hide. It wasn't until I got a copy of some old court documents that the pieces finally fell into place. Elaine had falsified papers, hidden accounts, and rerouted money that was legally mine. Everything I had been denied as a child, birthdays, small allowances, even the inheritance I had discovered at 16, was part of a carefully planned pattern. The betrayal cut deeper than ever. Worse, I realized Marley hadn't chosen to stay on her mother's side out of malice. She had been manipulated, convinced that supporting Elaine was the right thing to do. It wasn't just anger I felt anymore, it was clarity. I could see the full picture, the lies, the manipulation, and the way my family had been used as pawns in Elaine's plan. For the first time, I understood that revenge wouldn't be about shouting or hurting anyone physically. That wouldn't fix the years of pain. It had to be smarter, precise, and permanent. I decided to confront my past strategically. Every move would be calculated, every step measured, and my weapon would be the law and the truth. I spent weeks planning, quietly gathering everything I had documented over the years, organizing it like a map of betrayal. The anger that had simmered inside me for years was no longer just a weight, it became focus. I didn't want to ruin Elaine out of spite. I wanted justice, and I wanted the world she had manipulated so carefully to finally recognize the truth. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The child who had been abandoned at 11 was gone. In her place was someone who knew exactly how to turn betrayal into accountability, and I was ready to make sure Elaine could never hide from what she had done. I knew I couldn't do this alone, so I hired Elena Vargas, a private investigator with a reputation for uncovering things people thought were hidden forever. From the first day, she dug through records, contracts, and old bank statements, tracing every move Elaine had made over the past 20 years. What we found was worse than I imagined. Elaine hadn't just withheld my inheritance, she had actively diverted it. My trust fund, the money meant to secure my future, had been funneled into accounts I had no access to. Even medical insurance benefits I was entitled to were quietly rerouted, leaving me and others in vulnerable situations. Every step of my life had been manipulated without my knowledge, every opportunity controlled, every safety net stripped away. Elena also uncovered proof of deliberate neglect, forged signatures on school documents, manipulated paperwork to make it seem like I was failing or unworthy of support, and letters that were altered to misrepresent my situation to family and legal authorities. It was all there, black and white, undeniable. Together, we built a timeline year by year, betrayal by betrayal, showing how Elaine had controlled my life from the shadows. Birthdays missed, letters ignored, funds stolen, medical needs ignored, all carefully documented. Each page told a story of manipulation, of the years I had lost, and of the injustices I had endured. For the first time, I had more than anger, I had evidence. I could see a path forward, a way to confront Elaine not with shouting, but with truth. Everything she had tried to hide was coming to light, and I was ready to use it to finally hold her accountable for the child I had been, and the person I had become. I called Elaine one afternoon, my voice calm but polite, pretending I just wanted to catch up. "It's been a long time," I said, keeping the words light, careful. I could hear the faint hesitation in her voice, the surprise at hearing from me after so many years. I didn't rush, I let small comments slip in, subtle hints about things only I could know: documents, letters, the missing inheritance. Each word was measured, designed to watch her reaction without giving away everything. At first, she laughed it off, a nervous chuckle, trying to keep the conversation casual. But when I mentioned the details more pointedly, her tone changed. There was a flicker of denial, then irritation, and finally a sharp edge of aggression. I could hear her composure cracking with every sentence. The woman who had seemed untouchable on the outside was suddenly vulnerable, frustrated, and unsure of how to respond. Marley, who had been listening quietly, began to shift. I could hear her in the background, her voice hesitant, almost questioning. For the first time, she seemed unsure where her loyalty should lie. The cracks in Elaine's narrative were spreading, and Marley was seeing the truth in ways she hadn't before. I stayed calm the whole time, letting the tension build without attacking. The anger I had carried for years didn't need to erupt yet, it was enough to watch her unravel in front of me, to see that the control she had always held was slipping. That day, I realized something important: the seeds of truth, carefully planted, were enough to begin undoing everything she had tried to hide. The day Jordan Peck called me into his office, I could feel my heart pounding, though I tried to act calm. He laid everything out clearly: the inheritance, the trust funds, the accounts, all legally mine. Every dollar Elaine had taken or diverted had been done illegally. The papers, the signatures, the manipulations, it was all there, undeniable. For the first time, I didn't have to guess or imagine, I had proof, solid and official, that everything I had suffered was the result of deliberate lies and theft. With the documents in hand, I knew it was time to confront Elaine directly. I arranged a meeting, calm and professional, presenting the evidence point by point. I watched her face as I laid it all out, her carefully constructed facade of control and composure faltered. Guilt flashed in her eyes, then fear, and finally the realization that her manipulation could no longer stay hidden. The truth she had buried for decades was now in the open, undeniable, and public. Marley, who had been hesitant for so long, finally stepped forward. Seeing the facts, the clear evidence of our mother's actions, she understood the betrayal I had endured. She didn't speak angrily or accuse, instead, she quietly acknowledged the truth and chose to stand with me. That moment, small as it seemed, brought a sense of closure I hadn't dared hope for. Elaine's actions and her past manipulations became known within the family circle. No longer could she control the story, hide the truth, or manipulate perceptions. I didn't need to seek revenge through anger or humiliation, the evidence itself spoke louder than any words I could say. For the first time in my life, the balance had shifted, and justice, quiet and undeniable, was finally on my side. When the legal process finally concluded, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The inheritance, all the money that had been stolen from me for decades, was finally mine. Elaine faced consequences she could no longer avoid: financial losses, exposure of her lies, and the social scrutiny of the family who had once turned a blind eye. She had spent years controlling the story, but now every secret was laid bare, and she couldn't manipulate anyone anymore. I decided to host a small family gathering, calm and understated. It wasn't a celebration of revenge, but a quiet display of the life I had built despite everything. Friends and family noticed the confidence I carried, the stability I had achieved, and the respect I had earned. Elaine sat there, a part of the room but no longer in control. Her attempts at subtle dominance went unnoticed, and for the first time, I saw her truly powerless. I didn't shout, humiliate, or publicly shame her. That wasn't my goal. The real revenge wasn't anger or drama, it was the truth, the legal victory, and the way she now had to live with the consequences of her actions every single day. Each glance she cast at me was a reminder that the control she once had was gone, and there was nothing she could do to reclaim it. For me, the satisfaction wasn't in seeing her fall, but in reclaiming my life and showing that I had survived, grown, and thrived. Revenge had been quiet, calculated, and effective. And as I looked around at the room, at the family who could finally see everything clearly, I realized that the years of pain had shaped me into someone stronger, and that was the most powerful justice of all. Sitting alone one evening, I thought back on everything, the fear, the betrayal, and the years I had spent feeling abandoned. The pain was real, and it had shaped me in ways I couldn't have imagined. But through it all, I had grown stronger, wiser, and more determined to never let anyone control my life again. Those years of suffering left scars, yes, but they also gave me a clarity and resilience I hadn't had as a child. Reconnecting with Marley brought a kind of healing I didn't know I needed. We talked for hours, sharing memories and regrets, and finally understood each other. The silence and distance of the past melted away, replaced by trust and a bond stronger than any manipulation could break. It was the first time in decades that I felt a sense of real family, careful, cautious, but genuine. I also realized that my experiences didn't have to end with me. I wanted to turn my past pain into something meaningful. I began helping children in foster care, supporting those who had been neglected or abandoned, giving them guidance, resources, and hope. What I had endured became my purpose, and in helping them, I found a new kind of peace. Looking back, I saw the long road clearly, 21 years of secrets, betrayal, and exile, but truth has its own way of finding you. Every lie Elaine tried to hide, every injustice she thought she could control, eventually came to light. And in the end, it wasn't just justice for me, it was the beginning of a life built on honesty, resilience, and the choice to create good out of pain. That was the legacy I wanted to leave, for myself, for Marley, and for the children who needed someone to fight for them.